So I'm going to show you how to paint this very atmospheric autumn trees landscape scene. I'm using quinacridone gold. I'm also using burnt sienna. And lastly, I'm going to be using one of my favourite colours, ultramarine. And just keep the drawing really, really simple. So what I'm doing now is I'm mixing up some quinacridone gold using my size 10 brush. I'm just creating a really big puddle because I need lots and lots of paint. I'm mixing up some burnt sienna now as well, another big puddle of this. Make sure you've got plenty of paint so you don't run out. And as you saw there, I've mixed the ultramarine with the burnt sienna as well. Nice big creamy sort of puddle as well. Now I'm using my large flat soft haired brush and wetting the paper. So I'm using the size 14 brush here, nice large brush, loading it and painting the quinacridone gold wet into wet. I'm actually painting the quinacridone gold in the foreground here. It's just a bit more creamy quinacridone gold. Now this is the burnt sienna. I'm just painting this damp into wet. I'm just mixing up now some of the ultramarine and the burnt sienna and painting damp into damp. Some just darks now in this foreground. I'm just lifting off now just to get some of the light back, especially just below the horizon. That lovely yellow grass is there, and also to define the path a little bit. Even though it may not be like that in the photograph, I want some light here so my eye goes up to the light in the painting later on. So I'm lifting off here with a damp clean brush and just wipe the excess off on a paper towel as well. I'm actually painting now into this area here a mixture of the burnt sienna and the quinacridone gold, and this is the start of some of my foliage that I'm going to be painting in the trees. And I just wanted to get lots of really warm colour on the right hand side of this painting. I'm just softening those edges there using my size 10 brush. Sprinkled some salt in the foreground there, and I'm just adding a little bit more of this burnt sienna to the right hand side. There's quite a lot of dark here, but I wanted to get this lovely warm colour in, sort of almost building foundations for the painting. I thought for those of you that love brush show, time to put a little bit of brush show on the damp surface. So I'm using grey, but you could use black. Just tapping the little drum here, releasing the particles, and they'll start to spread in a minute as well because of the damp surface. The painting has dried and I'm really pleased with the salt and with the brush show. So this is a mixture of ultramarine with a touch of the quinacridone gold and a touch of burnt sienna. Very, very watered down. I've added a touch more burnt sienna and I'm painting that wet into wet down to the horizon line there. So I've just added a little bit more ultramarine and burnt sienna here and just sort of cutting into the top area of that light grass on the horizon line there using my size 10 brush, just dropping this colour in wet into wet just a little bit more. I've decided to soften this area here just because I felt it was coming forward too much. So I'm glazing over my brush, so you'll still be able to see it a bit like the photograph. You can see bits of textures and things like that, but it's kind of in the shadows. So I'm just lifting off here some of the lighter areas as well, reserving that, and also using my paper towel to lift off some of the light on the horizon. And now it's time to allow your painting to dry again. So what I'm doing now is using a natural sponge. You could use a scourer or even stipple it with your paintbrush if you wanted to. I'm actually printing here with the sponge some quinacridone gold, sort of a mid-tone wash. It's still quite watery. So I'm now mixing up some of the burnt sienna. So the wash is quite a milky wash. It's not too creamy, but it's not very watery. So I'm just tapping away here very gently, not pressing too hard because you just get a sort of smudgy mark. I want to try and create lots and lots of texture with the sponge. So I'm just again tapping away here, and I've mixed up some ultramarine into the quinacridone gold with a touch of burnt sienna to make this sort of sludgy neutral green, not too bright because this is an autumnal scene. I'm just tapping in damp into damp a darker wash here, mainly with the burnt sienna with the ultramarine, just to create some shadows in the foliage. So once you finish your sponging, let your painting dry and it's time to paint the branches. What what I'm doing now is mixing up the ultramarine, start with that first, and then some of the burnt sienna. So you've got a really lovely dark colour. It's almost like a Payne's grey. And I'm using my size 6 brush, working wet on dry, painting in the tree trunks and branches. And as you can see there, I'm leaving gaps so the foliage looks like it's in front of the tree trunks there and the branches as well. So I'm going to work my way across the painting. Sometimes the tricky parts of trees are the bottom of the trees, so I'm just softening the bottom of these trees here. I didn't quite like what I was doing. That's what I love about watercolour painting. You can lift off, you can correct your mistakes. I'm just going to mixing up creamy ultramarine with the burnt sienna, and I'm going to continue on painting my tree trunks and branches. So as you can see there, I'm leaving gaps for the foliage, and it's really effective. And you may want to swap to a smaller brush or even a rigger or a liner brush if you are painting the sort of smaller branches, and just take your time with it and just try to sort of pick out something in the photograph and try to copy it as best you can. Remember, you don't have to paint all the twigs and all the branches, you're just giving an impression. I'm painting in all the sort of smaller trees behind in the distance there quite quickly and slightly diluted so they look like they're further back as well. Now, I wasn't comfortable with this dark sort of branch in the top left-hand corner here. It was really sort of catching my eye all the time, and you don't want anything distracting the viewer from your sort of focal point and the sort of center of your painting. So I'm using a stencil brush. You could use an old synthetic brush or a sponge just to lift off the paint, and when you do lift off, make sure the water is clean and that your brush is clean, and then lift off any excess liquid with your paper towel. I also thought it's quite nice just to lift off some other parts of the painting because it's creating a little bit of atmosphere, you know, sort of soft light. So I'm going to dry off the painting again, and I'm mixing up a little bit here of some quinacridone gold. I'm going to do a little bit more sponging, and I'm just tapping in now some more of the quinacridone gold with my sponge, wet on dry. As you see, I filled in that little gap on the top left as well. I'm actually trying to follow the photograph, which I absolutely love, as best I can, sort of printing on this lovely sort of burnt sienna orangey colour. So I'm going to allow my painting to dry once again and finesse some of the branches, some of the smaller ones, using my size 2 brush with a mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna. Your eyes are not fooling you. The painting has been turned around. I just find it easier sometimes when I'm painting smaller branches just to twist my painting around to get access to it, so it makes it easier to sort of finesse these very small delicate branches. As you saw there, I was finessing some of the tree trunks as well, blending them in a little bit into the foliage colour. So I've allowed my painting to dry once again, and I'm using a very dark colour here. It's the ultramarine and the burnt sienna. I'm just tapping some dark in the top left hand corner, just covering that area where I'd lifted off the branch earlier, and just tapping in a few darks here and there very gently, just to build up that light to dark and to create depth in my painting. It's time now to paint these fence posts, and I'm using my size 2 brush, but use a brush that you're comfortable with and just keep loading it as well. I'm almost loading it for each individual post. If you notice, the posts nearest to us are taller and darker, and as I work my way along going into the distance, they get shorter, and I'll also dilute the wash as well slightly, as you can see I'm doing here, to make it slightly lighter in tonal value so that it looks like it's receding off into the distance. And as you can see, it gets smaller and smaller until it's almost a dot on the horizon. And as you can see, it's almost these are diagonal lines. It's really effective. It's 1 point perspective. And what I'm doing to bury these posts into the ground, I'm putting some grasses at the bottom. Even though it may not exist in the photograph, it's a good artistic tool, this little trick to make the post look like they're buried in the ground. You can also do this with the tree trunks as well. Again, I'm paling the grasses as it goes off into the distance as well, and I'm going to soften that as well with a damp brush because I felt it was a bit too detailed looking. It was coming forward. Sometimes to help you with this, because obviously I've been painting a long time and I can see it, I would suggest taking a photograph if you can, and look at your photograph, because you can be more objective if you're not sure about something. Or if you can't do that, turn your painting upside down or put it up on a shelf. You can be a lot more objective looking back at something from afar. So what I'm doing now is I'm using burnt sienna and ultramarine with the size 2 brush and sort of scrubbing in with the side of the brush some texture here. It's kind of the edge of the path here, so the marks get smaller as they go away from you and less textured. So I'm just softening the ones in the distance. I felt they're a little bit too dark. Again, I'm lifting off doing this so it kind of disappears. So your imagination makes up for what's not there in a way, fills in the blank. So I'm just softening with some water here, just picking off a little bit of that colour and also adding a little bit more light back on the path. Back again with the stencil brush. I've had this brush for years. It's gonna wear out soon. But as you saw there, I dipped it into my water pot, took the excess water off on the paper towel, and now I'm working in a circular motion, just moving that sort of paint that's dried and lifting off, and using the paper towel, lifting off again, and keep working into it. So the outside circle I'm doing now is not as hard because I want that sort of glow from the sun. The central part is white, sort of getting the white of the paper as best I can. These colours do lift off nicely. They're non-staining colours. So I'm working away here, really trying to get that centre part to look the lightest possible, and then just working away around that really sort of outside area of that circle there. So there's some lovely soft light. And I quite enjoy doing that. So I thought, why don't I put some soft light on the horizon as well? This brush is quite sort of big actually to do this. So you might want to use a smaller brush if you've got one. But I was just in for a penny, in for a pound here. So I'm just lifting off some light here. I will glaze this with some quinacridone gold once it's dry. But I just want to lift off a little bit more just to create this lovely atmospheric effect, especially around the horizon area. It looks like the sun sort of caught the top of the grasses there. Lifting off on the left-hand side to balance things out as well. And just to add a bit of soft light here, not as much as on the right-hand side. Just taking a little bit more off the horizon there as well. And so I'm going to allow my painting to dry. And I'm just adding a little bit of white paint into the centre here because there was a little bit of a splodge there, and I'm just going to soften it with a damp brush there. So if you aren't successful with lifting off enough sun, you can actually add some white gouache or white watercolour. I've diluted a little bit of the quinacridone gold, and I'm working on the outside of that as well and softening just to warm up that area. And I'm using that very dilute quinacridone gold and glazing it here on the horizon where I'd lifted off to create a lovely yellow glow there using my size 6 brush. And I'm glazing very, very gently here so I don't disturb the paint underneath some of those gaps that I lifted off, and it creates a lovely golden light to come through your painting there and along the path as well. I'm mixing up a big puddle of very dilute ultramarine. I think there might be a tiny bit of burnt sienna in there as well, and I'm glazing with my large flat brush. It's a soft brush, glazing it gently onto this foreground to create all of this lovely shadow. Now you don't have to do this because it's quite a lot of dark already in the foreground, but it's just to show you that you can glaze and create some lovely shadows as well. And it's time again to dry my painting. So as you can see, the shadows really push back there, but I thought I'd just add a little bit more texture to the foreground there using some of the burnt sienna. I'm putting a little bit more in the foliage of the trees, really to add that warmth that's in the painting. I really want to sort of create that lovely warmth of the autumnal colours in the trees. So I'm adding a little bit of that burnt sienna and ultramarine in the foreground as well, just a little bit more texture to finish off the painting. I felt that some of my fence posts had got lost a little bit from the lifting off, so I'm just repainting the foreground ones of those just to bring them forward to create some depth in my painting. I've mixed up some white and quinacridone gold. I'm using my size 4 brush and I'm spattering it over the foliage and over the foreground to create some sparkly light. And you can see that in the photograph as well, the way the sun's caught the top of the leaves, etc. So I'm going to dry my painting again and remove the washi tape. It comes off so well to reveal a lovely white border, and I'm so pleased with my painting. It's got so much atmosphere. But what I thought I would do is I would paint a little bit more detail on the branches with my size 2 brush with the mixture of the ultramarine and burnt sienna, and just join things up a little bit more. I sort of painted it on quite quickly, and now I'm just finessing, just creating a little bit more detail, thinner branches, taking my time just to bring this painting to life. And where there were gaps in the trees, I'm actually filling in some of them. It felt a bit too gappy, so I'm just softening some of those now as well. I felt that looked a little bit better. I wanted to create a sort of focal point, or to draw your eye into the distance there. So I've added a little bit of white and quinacridone gold mixed, wet on dry, and I'm just softening now with my size 4 brush to finish off. So here is the finished painting. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. And if you'd like to support the content that I create here on YouTube, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? You'll get access to extended tutorials, exclusive weekly tutorials, and downloadable outline sketches. Details about this extended tutorial and my Patreon membership can be found in the description below. Just click more. Thanks so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.